In our noble sport of professional wrestling, being a good talker is often as important as being great between the ropes, and this is particularly true in America, where mastery of the verbal arts is absolutely vital. In most cases. If you want to make it in this world, you're probably going to need to learn how to spin a yarn. But like every rule, this one has its exceptions, and the people we're about to talk about today became bona fide wrestling legends despite glaring limitations on the microphone. Be it through immense physical charisma or stunning ring work, most of them found a way to compensate. Nonetheless, they've always been better when they either let someone else do the talking or just keep their gob shut entirely. I'm Andy for What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 legendary wrestlers who couldn't cut a promo. Number 10. Sid. Oh, Sid. Dear precious Sid. Look, I love the old psycho and would put him down as one of the most fun guys to watch ever. But this is largely because inside the ring and out, he was always, well, just a little bit crap. The big fella had roughly 3 things going for him as a performer. Number 1, presence. Number 2, size. And number 3, intensity. He was a dangerous mountain of a man, bringing a bumbling chaos that was totally unique to him. You knew the wheels could fall off at any second, and this was Sid's appeal, as he demonstrated in that famous Nitro promo in which he said the following to Kevin Nash. "You can wear any Halloween costume you want, but you know and I know that you are only half the man I am, and I only have half the brain that you do." Which I think kind of says it all, doesn't it? Number 9. Dino Bravo. This fella was such a big star in the Montreal territory that Vince McMahon once pulled Hulk Hogan from a dream match with him out of fear that Bravo, who regularly drew crowds of up to 20,000 fans, would have been cheered over the Hulkster. Now that's popular. Keep in mind as well that this was in the mid-80s, when Hulk was like the most famous thing in the world, apart from, I don't know, Cyndi Lauper? Regardless, Big Dino never really cracked it in the WWF, with a poorly received anti-American heel turn sinking him in 1986. He was big, powerful and imposing, but his lackluster promo game played a big part in his downfall, as Bravo's imperfect English and awkwardly blunt delivery were a huge millstone, and they definitely hindered his ability to get over in Vince McMahon's world. Number 8. Lita. Lita got over not because she was a great talker, but because of her willingness to bump big for her charges, her daredevil style, and a tremendous moonsault. She was a perfect fit at the perfect time, and became a pivotal Women's Revolution forebearer and a rightful WWE Hall of Famer without ever mastering the verbal arts. Her strengths as a performer lay elsewhere, and even today when she's brought in for guest spots, Lita really kinda struggles on the microphone. Now she isn't terrible per se, and certainly isn't league with some of the names higher up on this list, but she rarely sounds sure of herself, and honestly, she never has. Throughout their groundbreaking feud and beyond, it was Trish Stratus who was always the more compelling talker of the two. But that being said, if we're being honest, nothing in Trish's arsenal in the ring was as sick as Lita's moonsault. Number 7. The British Bulldog. As a Brit, I kind of hate that I have to throw Davey Boy Smith on this list, but you know, there's just sadly way too much evidence to not have him on here. A quick search through his promo history yields some absolute disasters, including his swaying interviews for the old WWF Warzone game, and perhaps the least threatening verbal volley that anyone has ever thrown at Vader. So yeah, sorry Smithy, here you are. Bulldog was set to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame this year. A multi-time mid-card champion and one of WWE's most prominent wrestlers through much of the 80s and 90s, Smith was hindered only by personal problems. And while he never had the most finesse between the ropes, he was, at the very least, carryable, and you know, that SummerSlam 92 main event with Bret Hart still stands as a classic 28 years on. It's just a shame about the promos. Number 6. Chris Benoit. An easy entry but an essential one, Chris Benoit was to many the archetype of a prodigious in-ring talent whose phenomenal wrestling ability just wasn't reflected elsewhere. Benoit's deficiencies are perhaps a tad overstated. Now, this is largely a consequence of how he was presented, as, let's be honest, if you do one of those I don't need no gimmick type gimmicks, you're always going to get such criticisms. But they weren't unwarranted. A natural between the ropes, Benoit was often robotic on the microphone, seemingly only capable of conjuring true emotion through his ring work or via stunning cathartic moments like the conclusion of WrestleMania 20. As far as pure wrestling goes, Benoit was a worker without flaw. So ahead of his time that he would have stood out in any era, he was an intense, adaptive and smart wrestler capable of drawing something memorable out of any kind of opponent, thanks to the same absurd dedication to his craft that would eventually contribute to his descent into monsterdom. Number 5. Jeff Hardy. Take away the script, let Jeff Hardy be Jeff Hardy and allow him to speak from the heart, and he can hold an audience, man. He's one of many wrestlers hamstrung by WWE's crazy over-scripting, but that's the law in Vince McMahon's world, where an army of writers are paid to put their words in your mouth. Now, Jeff's brother Matt is a more compelling talker, but probably a less spectacular wrestler. While the younger Hardy lacks in spoken charisma, however, he more than makes up for it in physical charisma, wowing audiences not only for his willingness to take tremendous risks and put his body on the line for your entertainment. Jeff has an X factor, a magnetism that makes it hard to look away whenever he's doing his thing. This partly explains why he's so popular 22 years after signing his first WWE contract. But that being said, there's still a pretty big difference between the promos and the rest of his work. Number 4. Lex Luger. History has been grossly unfair to Big Lex, who was a far better pro wrestler than conventional wisdom would have you believe. Luger has been called overrated so often that he's probably now underrated, because in his heyday in the late 80s and early 90s, he was a performer far beyond the average turn of the century muscle man, with 1989 yielding a particularly impressive string of outstanding matches and outstanding feuds. Yes, his prime was short, but Lex didn't always suck, you know. His promos, however, most certainly did, and Luger's inability to capture the imagination and hold attention during interviews partly explains why he never made it as a true ace. Luger's delivery was just kinda lifeless. A man with next to no verbal charisma, his dull, droning cadence and stunted flow made it seem like he was always reading from some far-off auto cue. Lovely muscles, though. Tremendous. If only they could have spoken on his behalf. Number 3. Rey Mysterio. If Rey Mysterio was a better talker, he'd be one of the most well-rounded pro wrestlers of all time. Because the guy has literally everything else. He'll go down amongst the most influential performers the sport has ever seen, and one of the greatest baby faces ever, having popularized the lucha style for United States audiences and been able to stay relevant for 30 long years, breaking ground for smaller, more athletic wrestlers decade after decade. And even today in 2020, he is still a force, still killing it between the ropes, and still popular as hell. That Mysterio is so naturally likeable and easy to invest in compensates for the lack of memorable promos. He has never really needed them, though a stronger microphone acumen may have resulted in a career even more legendary than the one he has enjoyed. Number 2. Rob Van Dam. One of the few ex-ECW stars to truly get over with WWE audiences during and following the invasion, Rob Van Dam built a rapport with the crowd very, very quickly, despite barely opening his mouth. It was very clear that WWE had something awesome on their hands by the time the invasion angle and pay-per-view came around. RVD was given a platform to showcase the full breadth of his skill set, and he prospered, bringing all the hyper-athleticism and flashiness that helped him take flight in ECW and enjoying the bulk of the crowd support against Jeff Hardy despite playing the villain. Great stuff, and a near-perfect microcosm of why Rob Van Dam, the wrestler, worked. While there has always been a certain charm to Van Dam's spaced-out promos and his current hard-partying character is pretty amusing, he remains a below-average talker, particularly when you consider his other abilities. See Matt Riddle for a more compelling example of how to pull stoner promos off on the microphone. And at number 1, Brock Lesnar. Repeat after me on 3, 1, 2, 3. I don't give a shit about your kids. Brock Lesnar has always been good for lines like this one, which he famously spat at Heath Slater on the 15th August 2016 episode of Raw. He's such a big, imposing beast of a man that threats like these always land, with the rest of the impact coming from the line's brevity and rarity. He barely ever opens his goddamn mouth, so when he does say something, well, you listen. But the thing with Brock is that for every "I don't give a shit about your kids," there's a "Paul, say something stupid." For all he has mastered between the ropes, Lesnar has never been a good promo. His fearsome aura is stripped away by a voice too soft for his frame and presentation. He looks like a monster and he is rightly booked like one, but he never sounds like one. So it's kind of fortunate then that he has never really needed to truly excel at this part of the game, because by his side is one of the best managers and talkers in wrestling history in Paul Heyman, sparing Brock the need to ever spit more than the odd line here and there. So that's our list, but what do you guys think, and can you think of any others? Let us know down in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. And once you've done that, you can follow us on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE and myself at Andy H. Murray. The H stands for half the brain that you have. Goodbye.